Hey, what's up guys? Moldover here. I am really excited to show you a brand new controller that I'm releasing, the Mojito. But before we talk about that, real briefly, I just want to tell you about where it came from. This is the Mojo, my custom controller that I've been touring and performing with for I think something like 10 years now. It's an incredibly durable controller. It's got really unique ergonomics. It's got loads of touch strips and arcade buttons. Great stuff. I've been playing with this thing for so long and I love it. The only thing about it is that when I was first playing with it, this is the only thing I would bring to a show. It's the only instrument I brought on stage, so I made it incredibly durable and didn't really care about how big or heavy it was. So it's kind of a beast, and I bring a stand with it, a percussion stand everywhere I go so I can mount it facing the audience, and it's awesome, but it's a lot to tote around. And so I became interested in the idea of making something smaller and lighter and more portable. Maybe I could throw it on a mic stand, but it's a ton of work to custom design a controller, especially if you want to be able to make copies of it for other people that might want one. So enter Yaeltex. So Yaeltex is this great company in Argentina that has designed a system. They call it the Factory, and you can go on their website, and just in your web browser they have an interface where you can pick the size of your case. You can drag and drop these little modules. It's like fader module, arcade button module, rotary encoder module, and you can see everything is kind of laid out on a grid, so you have a fixed, number of spaces in there, but you can drag and drop any controls you want, and you can even do a custom graphic for the faceplate. So you can see I put the name of the controller, Mojito, and I put my name and my symbol down there, and there's some cool colors and circuitry type graphics in the background there. And it's awesome. It's super configurable. It's got a lot of really powerful features for the rotary encoders, bunch of things that I really love. And so for the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about this controller and all the cool things it can do, and then also show you this template that I made so that if you want to get one of these and use it with Ableton Live right away, you have an easy way to do that. So let's check it out. So first thing, we got the tempo encoder up here in the upper right hand corner. You can see I got gross control with a quick twist and push and turn for fine control, something I've wanted for a long time. So that's just one of many things you can do with the encoders in Yeltex's system. The encoders are super powerful. You can do a million different things, but that's not too exciting. What's more exciting is the next encoder, which lets me pick scenes. I got scene down, scene down, scene down, scene up. So each click of the encoder is selecting a different scene up and down, and push to fire a scene. And we're off. We're mixing channels, right? 4-channel mixer. You might notice this. Don't be distracted. This is a visual metronome. Just a cool thing I like to do now and again. It's kind of a neat way to see where you are on the bar. If you're doing some crazy wacky stuff, you can come back in on the one. But what's more interesting is volume, right? So different channels. I've got the songs broken up into 4 stems, and you might notice the volume meter is happening. So yeah, another cool thing Yaeltex lets you do with their encoders is you can have two functions. Actually, it's more than 2. One of those functions is it displays a volume meter based on a MIDI CC coming in. So you can see I've got that post fader, so there's a visual representation of any sound that's happening anytime on the Mojito, which I love. And they added those colors, that kind of blue to yellow to red, which I think is sweet. But they still function as regular rotary encoders. And I use that to do channel effects. So each of these encoders controls a few different channel effects, and the way I do that is the normal rotation is some kind of continuous effect for just that channel. So I'll play with the drums. So you can hear I got some different rhythmic effects, and there's that little white line on top of the volume meter as an indicator. Then I use the push on the encoder as a send, and I got that cool momentary light. Yeah, another neat little detail. And that sends to 2 returns. There's a delay return over here and a reverb return over here, and these are kind of smart. It's both a level and a few different parameters. But just to demonstrate that, let's send it over to the delay. It's a delay. Tweak that, just throw it off, and the reverb. So pretty simple. So these all send those two effects, and there's different channel effects on each channel based on the kind of material that's on there, right? You want different effects on your vocals than you might have on your drums. So another way to mix is with these buttons, right? So something I love about the Mojo, and I've been able to recreate here, is to kind of cut and gate things with these arcade buttons. So usually I have a beat going or something. And just do that while doing some different effects. It's a really fun way to remix stuff in a really percussive and live way. You can see they got these little lights down here, which I love. A little extra visual feedback, lots of visual feedback on the Mojito. It's one of the things I really love, is being able to do a lot of stuff with LEDs. That's great. So these buttons underneath all the arcade buttons, these are toggles to a master effects bus. And this I love for some reasons I'll get into later. Right now I'll leave them all assigned so that you can just hear like master effects on everything. And what am I using to control master effects? On the Mojo, I love to use those touch strips, and I've been able to recreate some of that behavior here on the Mojito with these joysticks. So they have two different kinds of joysticks you can get in your controller. Basically, it's whether they have a return to center spring like these do, or if they just stay in the position where you leave them. And I wanted the return to center ones because you can kind of use them as a momentary effect, just like the touch strips on the Mojo. You touch, you modulate, you let go, it goes back to center. You could think of these in a similar way. And so I've actually done some cool Max for Live programming that splits them into 4 different CCs to go to 4 different effects for each one. So up, down, left, right. On each joystick is a different effect on the master bus. So check it out.
I can't ignore nothing to know. Only but for the I feed myself.
So it's super fun. You can get crazy and wacky and just let go when they spring back to center, just like those touch strips. You get back to your home base, which I really like. And the assignment thing is cool because often like I'll leave them off on the drums so that there's still some like rhythmic anchor while I'm going crazy with the master effects. So having the drums stay dry is one thing I like to do, or sometimes I'll just, leave the effect only on one channel, and that way I've kind of got a bunch of different channel effects, because it's kind of limited just having this one rotary encoder. Now I have all the master effects, but just on my selected channel. And often I'll combine that with the cutting. Good times. There's a couple more little cool tricks I'll show you in here. I'll just mention briefly that these buttons, these just play whatever selected clip is on the selected scene. So I can scroll up and down through scenes, and these 4 buttons just play whatever clip on those 4 tracks. But the other cool effects things that I've done are a kind of a reset for all these encoders. So I might be going crazy with an encoder, maybe 2, like for a build-up or something. And particularly with the encoders, it's kind of hard to spin them back to 0 like you can, with a regular knob. So what I've done is I've programmed the push on this encoder, because I didn't really do anything else with it. This push on this encoder resets these whatever position they're at. So they can go crazy, go wherever, just push that, and I'll demo that without you hearing it. Turn them all up and push to reset. So the use of that is like build-ups. So kind of like the springs on the joysticks, it's a cool way to quickly reset the effects. And one other trick I did is these 2 buttons up here, these kind of, nondescript dual buttons, those switch to a whole new bank of effects. So if I get tired of the effects on my channels, I just hit this one. So if I don't like this effect, got a different one. And that's for all of these. So there's alternative effects here. So it's a thing to remember, but it's kind of cool just to have another bank of channel effects, and similarly, I got another bank of master effects. So if I get tired of these filters, go to my other bank. Got a whole different set of 8 different effects on this other bank of master effects. Let me think for a second. Is there anything I haven't shown you? No, there's just a few other master controls, specifically all these buttons up here. So this is just a tap tempo. This is like a master stop button, just stops immediately, no quantization wherever we are. This is the bass mono toggle. You know, sometimes I use that in venues without really good sound systems. You know, just like having stereo low frequencies can muck up some sound systems. This is a cool global thing. This is a global triplet thing. This is actually tied, if you look in the software, to the punch in out button. Which I don't really use in live performance, but it's just a way to get a global control happening. And so this changes that, but there's a whole bunch of little Max for Live devices distributed throughout this set in the effects that you'll find. And I use it to go between like a straight feel and a swing feel, or a duplet feel and a triplet feel, however you like to think of it. If you put a duplet delay on a song that has a swing feel or a triplet feel, to me it just sounds like rhythmically wrong. So basically I wanted a global control so that, like just happened, when I start this song, it immediately switches that to like triplet mode, and then any delays, any stutters, any choppers, anything rhythmic, like when it gets to that 16th note or that 8th note, where it really matters if it's a triplet or not, it switches to the appropriate thing. So basically I don't have to think about that anymore, and the rhythmic effects like always sound good. So there's the triplet, and if I break it, if I turn it off, just sounds wrong, right? So that's one of the things I did with Max for Live, is sort of making a global triplet system, which I think is really fun. And another thing in that same vein is I have some global quantization. It just goes between no quantization, which is kind of cool. Sometimes you want to like fire a clip, you know, rapid fire. This scene is not a good example, but turning off quantization to go kind of play a sample by turning quantization off, I think is really useful. And then I have a restart transport button, which I won't get into, but that's just useful at live shows, like when I get off the grid for one reason or another. Sometimes by turning off that quantization, that's one way to do that. Restart transport, this is a Max for Live thing that just resets the transport to 1, so the click and all the rhythmic effects and everything are kind of like resynced the moment you hit that button, if you hit it at the right time. So yeah, so that's what all those buttons do. Kind of some quirky, geeky stuff. And what else is in here? Yeah, this encoder right here, I just set this to be kind of a master ambience, adds a little more reverb to the whole mix. If you push and turn, it's the click volume. That is something I use live, is I use a click, and it's kind of cool to have a quick grab for that. And the way I actually use the ambience is actually a crowd mic, like a mic, so that I can mix into my in-ear headphones what's happening out in the audience, which is useful if I need to interact with the audience. And then over here, I just put 3 different flavors of volume control. You've got the amount of a multiband compressor. So it just kind of flattens things out. This is like a regular, you know, non-multiband version compressor, and this is just a literal master volume control up there in the corner. So again, a little bit different from how I operate things live, but I just thought I'd give you some useful controls relatively similar to the ones that I use when I'm performing live. And yeah, that's all the functions in the Mojito. I'll fly you really quickly through a few things in the software. I'm not going to go too deep into it in this video because I really just wanted to focus on this awesome controller, but I think you should just see some of what's going on in the software so that it's a little less confusing when you get in there. We'll check it out real quick. I've done a bunch of work to try and simplify it, make it really easy to understand. There's only a few quirks in here. So yeah, these first 4 tracks in this group called PB, short for playback, are the drums, bass, and the harmony, and there's no devices on those tracks. They're just playback tracks, playing back audio. And the reason for that is, if you look over to the right here, these 4 tracks that are all in mix effects, called Mix 1, Mix 2, Mix 3, Mix 4, those are just to get dummy clips. And that's really just for this one trick where I can, you know, spin up these encoders, and when I press this encoder, it's firing off this second scene called Reserved, and it just fires dummy clips that reset some automation on these effects things. So that's the whole reason for this whole mix section. It's a little bit complicated, but it's kind of cool to achieve that effect. So the stuff going on here, here's the AB effects. Like I mentioned, I have the AB bank selector for those 2 banks of effects, and then there's the one knob, the encoder for that channel. For volume, there's this other device over here. There's the fader and the button, and the reason to have those built into this one device is they kind of interact. I have it set up so that when the fader's up halfway, the button sort of punches the volume up to full, and it doesn't do any wacky, like doubles the volume when you hit the button with the fader all the way up. I don't like that kind of behavior, so it's good to have all the volume control here in this one rack. And then this Max for Live device right here, this is the tool I made that measures the volume that's happening on this track and sends that information to another Max for Live device, which then sends it to the controller. So this is necessary to get that cool VU meter thing on the rotary encoders happening. And if you want, you can check this out. It's just like whether it's on or off. You gotta have a unique number here if you're gonna have multiple copies of this thing for multiple channels. There's how frequently it sends the message, and just sort of a range of decibels it's looking at to create the messages. And some cool visual feedback, so you can tune that up. So that might be useful to you. It's pretty much the same thing on all these tracks. There's very different effects inside of these racks, but I cleaned up the UI. It's a nice thing about Live 11 is you can get rid of those macro knobs you don't need, so they all look really similar, behave really similar. There's a bunch more tracks over here, and these are some tricks I won't get too into, but these are basically to create the master effects with the assignable, switchable, whether this channel's in that effects bus or not. So won't get into that, but here's where all the master effects are, and this is kind of cool to see. These pull racks, you can open those if you want, but they're basically a way to do sends and returns. In this case, kind of like return tracks without a return track. I won't get that either because it's a little bit advanced, but basically you can just assume that this pulls the audio from tracks 1 through 4 from the playback tracks, so they wind up on this track via this device. And if you crack it open, you'll understand it. This is the little Max for Live device I made that deals with the joystick. So this takes all the parameters from the joysticks. That's what's MIDI mapped to it, and then it sends out 8 messages to an adjacent effects rack. So you'll notice if I move the first joystick up, it moves this macro number 4 from 0 to 127. If I move it down, macro number 3 from 0 to 127. Macro. If I move it left, right, up, down, each one is just sending 0 to 127, and that makes it a lot easier to design the effects that are actually in this rack. And again, there's a whole bunch of detailed effects in there that I'm not going to get into, but feel free to play with them. And when I hit that Master Effects AB button, you can see it's just toggling these 2 sets of devices so that you're either getting the A effects or the B effects on your master bus. These are the master return effects, the delay and reverb I showed you before. This is that global triplet thing I mentioned before, so you can see it in action here as I toggle the global triplet button. Here, I'll do it with my mouse. You can do it with the controller. You can see that this Max for Live device, it's detecting that the punch-in button has been hit, and it is mapped to this macro number 4 here, and then that goes to a bunch of devices inside that rack to deal with the rhythmic stuff I was talking about before. And you can bury this inside racks, and you'll find this device in a few other racks to deal with this global triplet system I mentioned. But there it is, kind of exposed for you. Here's that master ambience. It's just a reverb. And then these utility tracks over here, they deal with some of these tricks on the global level. So this one, the Max for Live, channel 16, it's just a bunch of devices living here. This one that deals with resetting the transport. This one for that global punch-in. This is just tracking whether that global punch-in is hit or not. Here is the quantize switching thing that I use. There's a tempo bump tool that's actually not being used in this version of the set. And here's the device that receives all the volume meters. Yeah, you can see those little meters on this device moving when there's something coming in on the volume meters, and this device forwards it on to the controller. You can see I made dummy clips here for triplet and straight feels, and those are just hitting this device. They're just automation for this device that's changing the global punch-in. And over here is like just a lighting track with just some simple clips. And this is just a loop playing some notes. And it's as simple as that to make the visual metronome you see down here, which is just a fun trick. I don't rely on that too much, and I'm not sure that my other Mojito template is doing that. But yeah, there's a couple other tracks here I'm actually just using to record this video. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope you can download this template and mess with it. And if you don't get yourself a Mojito, definitely check out Yeltex. They're doing really cool stuff. You could take the Mojito template and modify it, make it your own, or you can do something totally from scratch. And I'm just really impressed with what these guys have done, making a system that makes it possible to do a really custom controller like this. Yeah, check them out. See you next time.